In the beginning of our lives, in our mother's wombs, we started as one sphere, then gradually grew into various geometric forms. All life forms, trees, plants, dogs, cats, everything, originate from the same geometrical and structural patterns of creation. All life forms are based on these geometrical patterns. These geometrical relationships are important to perceive for two reasons. One, it's so that your left brain can actually see, comprehend, and realize that creation is not based on Darwinian's theory of evolution, that life is based on an accidental fluke. There is order in creation. There are cymatics, protons, mathematics, and geometry involved in our creation and in all creation. And through seeing this process of creation, you will begin to realize the unity of all life. Every known life form begins as a sphere. The sphere in relationship to humans is known as the ovum. The ovum is a perfectly round circle. This is our beginning as a perfectly round sphere. All of us begin as a sphere. Around the ovum is a membrane called the zona pellucida. The zona pellucida has to do with why the ancients put two circles around the flower of life instead of just one or none at all. Inside the membrane is a liquid, and inside that liquid there's another perfectly round sphere called the female pronucleus, which contains 22 plus 1 chromosomes. Half the chromosomes necessary to create a human body. The number of chromosomes changes depending on the life form, and those particular chromosomes are different in every life form. We start as the female ovum in our mother's reproductive system, waiting to be joined by our male counterpart. It does only take one sperm to fertilize an egg, but it takes hundreds of sperm to make that process possible. Out of those hundreds of sperm, 10, 11, or 12 must come together and form a pattern around the surface of the ovum that allows the 11th, 12th, or 13th sperm to enter the ovum. One sperm cannot get through the membrane without the help from the other 10, 11, or 12 sperm. The chosen sperm gets in through the zona pellucida with the help of the other sperm and then starts swimming toward the female pronucleus. Once this happens, the sperm's tail breaks off and disappears. Next, the tiny sperm's head expands and enlarges to a perfect round sphere. Becoming the male pronucleus, it becomes exactly the same size as the female pronucleus, and it contains the other half of the necessary biological information. Next, they pass through each other and form a geometrical relationship called the vesica piscis. At that exact moment, the male and female pronuclei form the image of the first motion of the first day of Genesis, and literally all the information of the reality and the light is contained in that geometry. Drunvalo Melchizedek theorizes that the female determines which sperm will enter, and that the male sperm has to have a matching spherical diameter identical to the female's in order for the male sperm to enter the ovum and for fertilization to occur. After the two pronuclei, the male and female, make a vesica piscis. The male pronucleus continues to permeate the female pronucleus until they are one. At this time it is called a human zygote, the first cell of the human body. We begin as a sphere before we were created into our fully formed human body, and to be specific, we were a sphere within a sphere. The human zygote is about 200 times bigger than the average cell size of the human body, so big it can be seen with the naked eye. When it divides into two, each of those two cells are half the original size. The cells keep dividing like this, getting smaller and smaller until they have divided 8 times and number 512. At that point, the average cell size of the human body is reached. When that happens, mitosis continues, and the dividing cells expand beyond the boundaries of the original zona pellucida. The next thing that happens in the conception process is that those little polar bodies begin to migrate through the zona pellucida. One goes down and becomes the south pole, and the other becomes the north pole. Then out of nowhere, a tube appears running right down through the center of the cell. Then the chromosomes break in half, and half of them line up along one side of the tube and half along the other. This is also evident in human energy fields. It's very much like the energetics of an adult human being. We have a similar sphere of energy around us. We have a north pole and a south pole, and we have a tube running right down through our body. Half of our bodies are on one side of that tube, and the other half is on the other side of the tube. This picture is very much like the energy field of an adult human being. After the chromosomes have lined up along the two sides of the tube, they form into two cells, one on each side of the tube, and each cell contains 44 plus 2 chromosomes. The next step is that the cells divide again, going from 2 to 4, a binary sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 16, etc. According to Drunvalo, the first 4 cells actually form a tetrahedron, not a square. A tetrahedron is one of the Platonic solids, and the apex of the first tetrahedron points either to the North Pole or the South Pole. A tetrahedron in a 2D form is a triangle, and it pointing upward or downward designates whether it is a symbol of water or fire. Water pertaining to a female sex and fire pertaining to a male sex. Drunvalo theorizes that depending on the apex of the tetrahedron, whether it is pointing up or down determines the sex of the unborn baby. Next, the cells divide into 8. They form one tetrahedron facing up and one tetrahedron facing down, forming the star tetrahedron. This is the egg of life. This form came out of Genesis. It came out of Yah's second rotation. Every single life known must pass through the egg of life. According to Drunvalo, this point where the original 8 cells form a star tetrahedron or a cube is one of the most important points in the creation of the body. The most important quality of these original cells is that they appear to be identical. There appears to be nothing different about them at all. These original 8 cells are closer to who we really are than our physical body is. They are closer to our nature. These 8 cells are immortal relative to our bodies. You have to keep in mind that we get a brand new body every 5 to 7 years. Every single cell in our body dies within a 5 to 7 year period and is replaced with a new one except for the original 8 cells. They remain alive from the time we are conceived until the time we die and leave our bodies. All the other cells go through their life cycles, but not these original 8 cells. These cells are centered in the precise geometric center of our body, which is slightly above the perineum. For the female, the perineum is located between the anus and the vagina. For the male, it's between the anus and the scrotum. There's a little piece of skin there, and even though there's not a physical opening, there is actually an energetic opening. That is where the central tube runs through your body, coming at the top through the crown chakra at the top of your head. If you look at a newborn baby during the first few weeks, you'll see the top of its head pulsing. If you were to look at the bottom of the baby, at its perineum, you'd see the same pulsing. That's because the baby is breathing in the proper way. Both ends are pulsing because of the electromagnetics that are flowing from the 2 poles, coming not only from the top down, but from the bottom up and meeting. From the point where the original 8 cells are located, it's the same distance to the top of your head as it is to the bottom of your feet. And the cells are arranged just as they were when they first came into existence, in the egg of life pattern, north up, south down. Drunvalo further states that human beings do not grow like a string bean, getting longer and longer. We actually grow radially and 360 degrees from the original 8 cells. After the 8-cell division, it divides into 16 cells, whereupon it forms another cube or star tetrahedron on the end. This is the last time it will be symmetrical. When it divides into 32, 16 cells are in the middle and 16 on the outside. At the next division, there are 32 more cells. The cells start to lose their symmetry and start looking more like a blob. Drunvalo states that the blob has consciousness in it, but if you know anything about water as to how it is conscious, then you know there is life and consciousness already existing from the first sphere. Once it gets to this state, it becomes a perfect hollow sphere. Then the North Pole starts dropping through the space inside, going down toward the South Pole, and the South Pole comes up through the space to meet the North Pole. The hollow sphere then becomes a torus, a spherical torus. Every single known life form goes through this torus stage. This information in the torus shape is called the morula. After this, the expansion goes beyond the zona pellucida and the cells begin to differentiate. The hollow space inside the torus becomes the lungs, the North Pole becomes the mouth, and the South Pole becomes the anus, and all the internal organs form inside the tube that runs through the middle. Drunvalo theorizes that this might be why biblical tradition says that the tree of knowledge of good and evil is an apple tree. So you can see we start out as a sphere, the ovum. We then move to a star tetrahedron at 4 cells, then onto 2 interlocked tetrahedrons at 8 cells. From 2 cubes at 16 cells, we turn back into a sphere, beginning at 32 cells, and from the sphere we become a torus at 512 cells. All of these forms are sacred shapes that come out of the first informational system of the fruit of life, which is based on Metatron's cube. As new human life grows, it takes the form of a Fibonacci spiral focused first around the eye and then the helix of the ear. In this way, the entire body resonates or unfolds outward from the center of the brain like an idea. Here, the divine proportion acts as a focusing function in the fetus for the development of sensory perception. As the largest of the 5 sense organs, the body continues to unfold along the Fibonacci spiral, now shifted to the front and centered on the navel. The skeleton and organs align at right angles to the spiral, proportioned according to 5-spaced rings, and the Vitruvian squaring of the circle. Here again, this is not a matter of natural selection and mutation, rather it is a simple matter of carbon-water geometry, governed by the divine proportion. In conclusion, you are not separate of nature, but part of nature and are nature. You are the Word of God, and you have an interconnected existence with the world around you.